welcome to Offsiders. Some of Australia's biggest sporting codes are shaping up in a battle to win over the next generation. The AFL unveiled the shiny new product, AFLX. Cricket declared the Big Bash would own February, and the A-League confirmed it would licence 2 new clubs. And this was all in the same week. So a turf war has erupted, quite literally, with AFLX taking over soccer pitches, and Adelaide United is seeing red.
We're just about set here at Hindmarsh Stadium, the first ever baller in AFLX history. Here we go.
The pitch looks not good. It's much worse than for the last game.
Back page of the Adelaide Advertiser today, talking about the state of the pitch and how difficult it will be for players tonight.
This game was really hard because the pitch was not the best.
How do you fix that? How do you find a solution? Very difficult when you're not the #1 sport in the country. I think the public in Adelaide deserve better.
So in the end, it was probably the best sporting contest for the weekend. Adelaide United and Central Coast playing out a dramatic 2-2 draw. John Stanley, does the World Game deserve better here?
Oh, it certainly does, and we know that we've had history here. With last year, the A-League Grand Final was a rugby game played the day before. But Hindmarsh Stadium is a stadium where the Adelaide team has established itself over many years. It would be, I imagine, its main tenant. And so the people that run it, they're running it as a business. The AFL comes in with its cash and its exposure. They take the cash, and the result was what happened last night.
I guess we've got the W League Grand Final this evening. We had AFLX on the same ground last night as well. So I guess last night with Adelaide United was a great sign that the game can still be excellent. But let's hope that it doesn't impact the game tonight.
There must be plenty going on behind the scenes there, because I mean, you don't just get to step in and use those pitches as the AFL has done without some sort of leverage. I don't know how they managed it at this time of year, to be honest. So
the sporting landscape continues to change and develop at this time. We know what to expect in the winter months. We know that the football codes will dominate. But is it necessary to extend the Big Bash into late February? That's what the Cricket Australia is talking about. Is it necessary that the AFL has a new product? Clearly, they see this as purely money spinners.
They have to work out what they're doing. I guess the Big Bash for me seemed even a little bit too long this year. So, and you know, I've got the kids. The kids go back to school in February. It's late anyway for the kids. They don't often get to stay up late enough to watch the second inning. So I don't know that the Big Bash is going to work extending it into February. And then there's expansion talk with the A-League saying that it wants to expand, and it's put a timeline on that now. And their numbers are down. So there's all this ambition, I think, with these sporting codes, but it's a big bridge to get to those points that they're talking about.
It is interesting. I mean, there is definitely an appetite to try new things. We saw FFA getting into esports, which we know is growing at an exponential rate. It seems that they were surprised by the success of that. I think my surprise is that they were surprised. It is hugely popular, but I mean, the question is, with all of the new innovation, what's going to work and what is not quite hitting the mark?
Yeah, well, they're all businesses that are trying to expand their business. So I think on the program last week or the week before, T20 International Cricket was given the thumbs down and virtually dispatched, and yet last Friday night, if you look at the fare that was on offer, AFLX T20 cricket in New Zealand, you'd have taken the T20 any day. It was phenomenal entertainment, and it showcased that fantastic competition we have in New Zealand in the short form of the game, which perhaps we don't leverage enough.
It feels like the A-League, and we saw a cracking contest last night. As I said, it was 2-2. Adelaide United were down 2-0, down to 10 men, fought back, a good crowd of 9,000-10,000 there in Adelaide for that one. But it feels like that the A-League really hasn't capitalised on owning this time of the year, and they did at one point. They did dominate. I know a big article in the Daily Telegraph today, double-page spread, talking about the crowd figures and the television ratings and how they have dropped. Is expansion the answer here? I mean, do you need to get your 10 teams right first, or, you know, is expand... And clearly the FFA, it seemed a little hurried. They rushed out this press release. There's no detail, but we know 2 new teams in the next 2 years?
I need this explained to me by someone who knows about the benefits of expansion, because what you've got with football in this country is massive participation, and they haven't quite been able to do what they want to do, which is all of these kids that are playing soccer or football, how do we get them to flood to the A-League and the W-League and to increase the viewing audience on TV? There must be a better way. I'm not sure that it is bringing in more teams. There is an issue in junior sport with money and the money that costs to get kids to play football. So maybe they haven't even tapped the sport in the way that they possibly could with participation. But it's something that they need to work out, I think, before they bring in new clubs.
Yeah. Well, you've got to feel invested in a team. I mean, the FFA is under pressure to bring in promotion relegation. So if you talk about money, you'd have another tier of clubs below that. So you try and swallow that in the context of what you've just said. But with expansion, I know there's talk from those who know about this that Geelong is keen to get involved in the A-League, and I know the southern Sydney area has got a long tradition. That St George area down into the Shire has got a real appetite to get involved in the A-League. Wollongong's had a long-standing ambition to get involved, but Sydney FC sees that as their territory. You've just got to have people investing in their club, don't you? To watch it on TV, they've got to feel invested and feel there's something at stake.
It's a tough question of what they're not getting quite right, because huge participation. The standard of the games in general is very good. When you go to the games, it is an enjoyable atmosphere. I don't know if it's just that it's not the best league in the world. It's certainly not, but it is a challenge to put your finger on what quite hasn't captured the hearts and minds of Australians.
Yeah, I think maybe they need to speak to the people at the NBL, which have broken away from the national body. In the last couple of years, they've done things a little bit differently, but certainly the NBL's had a good season.
What about AFLX? I think it felt like we learnt two things on Thursday, and that is that there should be no sex in Parliament and there should be no X in AFL.
Yeah.
What did you make of the experiment?
Well, it's basically the game is what the teams do at training. So it's conditioning for the players. It gets them working on their transition. So it's all the stuff that they do at training anyway, not just at the top leagues, different levels in Aussie rules. That's what you set up at training to get that type of game happening. It felt weird for me to have that on TV with all the advertising, junk food advertising, gambling advertising thrust in your face. And, the fact that they've named the goal, which we would otherwise on the ABC call a super goal, after one of their sponsors, felt like a satire of the entire industry.
I'm probably a little less hard on it. I agree. I didn't love watching it. I actually found myself watching the figure skating rather than AFLX. But what I did think was it's the sort of game that might appeal to non-traditional AFL audiences to play. Certainly more accessible because of the rectangle pitch, the lower tackling, the lower contested possession. While not typical AFL and not great to watch, it may actually be more accessible for kids and for new markets.
And I think there's two drivers here. One is clearly the rectangle pitch. We can annoy soccer in a sense, that annoy the world game, but also we can take it to Asia and we can market it in China. We've seen Port Adelaide go to Shanghai, and just trying to find a pitch that's up to AFL, that's oval and up to AFL standard has been difficult for that club. So that's one. And the other is the millennials, isn't it? Shorter, faster, quicker, Big Bash, Fast Five, we're seeing it all, rugby sevens. But I think you're right, Kim. I mean, at grassroots level, maybe there is the potential there.
Isn't the idea that it goes internationally? Well, that space is already taken by the rugby sevens right around the world. They've occupied that space, so I don't know they're going to occupy that space. And if you're talking about the northern states in Sydney, they're still struggling to get Western Sydney to embrace AFL. The TV ratings have plateaued in recent years. Swans can fill their grounds, but even a game like GWS Western Sydney a couple of years ago, they still didn't fill spotless stadiums. So they're still struggling to get the main game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, Kim, you make a great point about maybe there's good way for kids to play the game. But it's funny, isn't it, if you concentrate on making it a TV product and talking nonsensically about taking it internationally, then you're actually maybe channeling the funds the wrong way, because at so-called grassroots level, community level, look at Tasmania, look at country Victoria, these heartlands which are struggling to find players to get teams into those major leagues.
I found the timing very questionable. It's reported that they're taking money out of the budget for the women's AFL. And
where does the money come from?
Whatever money was there, and then obviously a lot of promotion, so a lot of dollars going into promoting this. Give the women some clean air, for goodness sake. I mean, the way... Are you serious about the women's game, or are you not serious about the women's game? And just we've seen on pay TV yesterday, they went back to back, and the women played. There's passion, there's intensity, there's fierce tackling, and then the men come on and do a training drill. So
I think that's actually great, because in this case, AFLW won that in their own right. It's sort of they didn't have them back to back. You weren't flicking between stations, but even if you had have been. AFLW would have won that because...
It's a much better game.
Yeah.
I mean, the tackling in AFLW is top-notch. It's in supreme pressure. The collisions are great, and that's what Aussie Rules. That's what I love about Aussie Rules. And while I would turn up and watch training runs, because that's what I just like to do, I'm a huge... Aussie Rules is my favourite sport, but the AFLW is way better than AFLX.
But if you're looking for a new product that can grow your fan base... Voila, there
right.
it is. I mean, we saw it do it last year.
If it's about Sydney and the Northern States, last Friday night, Drummoyne Oval 2 Fridays ago, even though the storm interrupted it, phenomenal atmosphere. I think they would have been surprised by how many people turned up for that GWS game in Sydney. You could barely move in the area around Drummoyne Oval by the side of the harbour, not a big oval. And I did what Richard Hines, I'm sure, didn't do, which is watched a fair bit of the AFLX. and I saw 2 interviews with Gillan McLaughlin, one on the first night and one yesterday. And he looked a little bit embarrassed. The sense I got was that he was starting to back off a little bit in terms of where this was going.
Yeah. We just saw on the screen before Aaron Phillips, and I think, that rivalry between AFLX and AFLW, what we saw in Aaron Phillips is what we have to look forward to in AFLW. She is a career elite athlete, and the skill and just the silkiness, competitiveness that she brought to the game, playing injured, was quite remarkable. And I think, give it 5 years, all the AFLW needs is time for that training and that skill level to step up. And
John, there'll be another outstanding display of female athletes on show this afternoon at the Sydney Football Stadium for the League final. So
this is what Kim just mentioned about the change over 5 years. We've seen that in women's football, because I went to see women's football at the Olympics in 2000, and then you look at it, international women's football now, and the transition, and you as an Olympian would have seen it, Olympics to Olympics. The skill levels are huge. They're saying 5,000 today. Maybe they'll get more than that as people start to hear about it. You'll be able to go along and watch a fantastic game of football.
And Melbourne City could stack up against any team in the world, almost any team in the world. They get internationals from around the world, and they've been so successful. Some of the players are saying they would like to take on any team in any competition anywhere around the world.
It's actually an interesting contest because, you've got Melbourne City, they're going for the 3rd premiership in a row. They bring the experience, the big game performances up against Sydney FC. They've had the form this season. They've really been, I think, undefeated since round 4. Very impressive. Interesting story in Lisa Devanna, who actually played for Melbourne City in their first premiership win. Went to Canberra United, served a suspension for a bit of a behind-the-play incident with Jess Fishlock, who is probably Melbourne City's most dangerous player out there. So I think the contest this evening will be tremendous. 9 Matildas on the field.
Yeah, 9 Matildas. It's a blockbuster, absolutely, well and truly. What about the Sydney FC, obviously, without Matilda and Caitlin Ford? She ruptured ligaments in her foot in the semi-final last week, and that also puts her Asian Cup in doubt for the Matildas. So it's not good news from a national perspective, but it'll be fascinating to see whether City can get the 3-peat.